God's chosen ones. Only 1 in a million carry this mark on their left hand. You should have died. Not once, not twice, 3 times, and you know it. That accident should have ended you. That breakdown should have buried you. That silence should have swallowed you whole. But someone stepped between you and the grave. And whispered, "Not yet, because your death was delayed, so your destiny could arrive on time." This isn't just a coincidence. It's confirmation. You're not lucky, you're marked. And now, your spirit is finally ready to remember. Why? The moment death missed you, you remember it, don't you? Not with your mind, but with your soul. That one moment, when time slowed, when your heartbeat screamed louder than your thoughts, when something should have taken you out but didn't. Maybe it was a car that stopped 1 second too soon. Maybe it was the bottle you didn't drink, the bridge you almost jumped from. The moment the pain said, "This is the end," but heaven whispered, "No, not yet." If you're watching this, it means death tried you and failed. And now, you're standing in the aftershock of survival, asking, why am I still here? This isn't superstition. This is strategy. This is divine choreography. Because chosen ones, they don't just survive. They escape 3 times, sometimes more. And every time you did, the spiritual realm recorded it. Not as coincidence, but as confirmation. You weren't spared because you were lucky. You were spared because you're loaded with light, with fire, with prophecy. And the enemy saw it first. That's why the attacks came early. That's why the battles made no sense. That's why you always felt like war followed you into every room. But here's what most people don't see. Survival is not mercy. It's proof that you're here for a reason you haven't fully remembered until now. So lean in. Chosen one. Don't scroll. Don't run. Don't doubt. The next few chapters will explain everything. Every scar, every close call, every delay. Because you weren't denied, you were preserved. And now your activation begins. Part 1. The night the breath stayed. She doesn't talk about it. Not in the daylight. Not even with people she trusts. But some nights, when the wind is quiet and the ache returns, she remembers. She remembers the hospital room. Too bright, too quiet. Monitors beeping like ticking clocks, as if counting down something sacred. They said her body gave up, that her heart shouldn't have made it, that the crash, the one she doesn't speak of, should have written the ending. But she woke up, barely, softly, with dry lips and blurred vision and no explanation. And the nurse standing over her had tears in her eyes, as if she had just seen a ghost come back from heaven. "You weren't supposed to make it," she whispered. "But you did." That was the 3rd time. The 2nd. No machines, no blood, just silence. The kind of silence that fills a person until they can't carry themselves anymore. Where showers become weeping rooms, and smiles become masks made of tired skin. She remembers laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, too numb to cry, too hollow to scream. She asked God softly, brokenly, "If I disappear, would anyone notice?" No answer came. But the next morning, the sun did, and a stranger sent her a message. "You were on my heart today. Don't give up." She didn't, though she almost did. The first time, she was just a child. Too young to remember, but old enough, somehow, to know there were fevers, doctors shaking their heads, a mother crying in the hallway, a name almost spoken at a funeral that never happened. She doesn't know the full story, but her spirit does, and every now and then, when she passes a mirror and catches her own eyes, she sees it. The girl who wasn't supposed to be here, and yet she is still walking, still carrying this invisible weight that people call strength. But she knows it's something else, something deeper. She's not just surviving, she's remembering that breath that stayed. It wasn't an accident. It was an assignment. She doesn't need applause. She doesn't need validation. She just needed someone to say it out loud. You shouldn't be here, but you are, and there's a reason for that. Because every time death came, heaven stood up and whispered into the darkness. Not this one, not yet. Part 2, the first escape. Before you had a voice. It happened before you had words. Before you knew what pain was. Before your memory had a name for the ache. But your soul remembers. The world thought you were just a baby. Small, fragile, new. But in the spirit realm, you were a threat the moment you arrived. They don't talk about it much. The complications, the way your mother clutched her stomach with fear in her eyes, the sudden hospital run, the whispered prayers, the doctors who shook their heads and said things like, "We'll do everything we can." But even they knew you weren't supposed to make it. Some said it was a medical miracle. Some said you were lucky, but heaven called it what it really was. Not yet. And if it didn't happen in the womb, it came in childhood. Strange sicknesses, fevers that spiked for no reason. Nights where you cried out, not from fear, but from a pain your tiny body couldn't name. People around you thought you were just high-strung, too emotional, too quiet, too intense. But you were already fighting things they couldn't see. You sensed the weight in rooms before you could reach the doorknob. You saw shadows in the corners. You knew when people weren't safe, even when they smiled. And when you told them, they said, "You've got such a wild imagination." But it wasn't imagination. It was discernment in its infancy. No one knew it. But spiritual warfare had already declared your name, and the enemy tried to cut your story short before it could be written. There was a moment. Maybe you don't remember it with your mind, but your soul still shivers when the wind hits a certain way. That one incident, that fall, that breath you almost didn't take, that hospital trip that could have gone another way. You survived, but barely. And from that day forward, you walked marked. They called you different, and you weren't just a child. You were a carrier of light, of oil, of assignment, and hell could see it long before you did. That's why you were misunderstood. That's why you were attacked in silence. That's why your childhood felt heavy in ways no one could explain. Because your calling didn't wait until you grew up. It showed up early, and it made you a target. But heaven had already written the ending. And even when darkness reached out to grab you, a hand stronger than death said, "Not this one, not yet." You didn't survive that early attack because of luck. You survived because of covenant, a divine contract signed in the spirit, long before your mother even knew your name. And every time you ask, "Why has life always felt harder for me?" remember this, because you escaped the first battle, before you even had a sword, before you had a voice, before you had a choice. You are still here, because heaven blocked the first bullet. Part 3, the second escape, the war in your mind. You smiled in public. You laughed at the right times. You answered, "I'm fine," with a voice that sounded convincing. But inside, you were drowning in silence, a silence so loud it echoed inside your ribs. No one saw it, no one asked, because you were the strong one, the helper, the healer, the one who always showed up for everybody else. But when it came time to fall apart, you had no one to catch you. This wasn't a car crash. This wasn't sickness. This wasn't some violent moment you could point to and say, "That almost ended me." No. This was slower, darker, quieter. This was the war that raged inside your own mind. The whispers that came at 3 a.m., the numbness that wouldn't leave, the questions that stayed unanswered. Why am I still here? What's the point of this life? Would anyone even notice if I was gone? It wasn't that you wanted to die. You just didn't know how to keep living with the weight. Some days you made it to work. Some days you didn't make it out of bed. Some days you spoke hope to others and cried yourself to sleep behind closed doors. No one saw your war, but heaven did. There was a moment, you remember it, when you almost let go, almost gave in, almost stopped fighting. Maybe it was pills in your hand. Maybe it was a steering wheel you gripped too tight. Maybe it was just the thought that vanishing felt easier than continuing. But right before you crossed that line, something stopped you. A color, a memory, a song, a breeze through the window that felt like a hand on your back. You didn't know it then, but that was divine interference, heaven whispering, "Hold on, don't go." Not yet. You thought it was weakness that kept you curled in bed, but it was actually strength, sacred strength, to stay through the pain. You see, the enemy couldn't take you out in childhood, so it came for your mind. It tried to convince you to self-destruct, but it underestimated the fire in your bones, the prayer your grandmother whispered over you, the angels on assignment watching your breath. And here you are, still here, still waking up, still searching, still alive. That wasn't an accident. That was your second escape, not from something outside, but from something within. If you ever wondered why you have such compassion for people in pain, why you're drawn to the broken, the anxious, the ones who suffer in silence, it's because you've been there, and you carry the proof in your quiet wisdom, in your depth, in your voice that trembles but still speaks. You're dangerous now, because what was supposed to silence you taught you how to listen. You escaped the battlefield of your mind. You rose when you had every reason to stay down. And that is a miracle disguised as resilience. You didn't just survive, you were sharpened. And the second time death came close, it lost again. Part 4, the third escape, flesh and bone. This time, it wasn't a whisper, it wasn't emotional, it wasn't spiritual, it was real. Metal, blood, sirens. That moment when you looked at your body and thought, this is it. There's something about the nearness of death, how it makes everything slow down. The glass falling in midair, the skid of tires, the way people scream in slow motion. You were there, in that moment, when your chest tightened, when your knees buckled, when your breath got caught in your throat and wouldn't come back. And somehow, you're still here. You don't tell many people. They wouldn't understand how seconds turned into eternity, how you saw things that couldn't be explained. You don't talk about the flash of white, the heat in your chest, the feeling like your soul was being pulled toward something you couldn't name. And then, a hand, a stop, a reversal. You should have died. The accident should have taken you. The illness should have spread. The fall should have broken your neck. The blade should have been too deep. But it didn't. The doctors called it a miracle. Some called it luck. But your soul called it what it was: divine intervention. Do you know how many people don't make it out of that kind of moment?
But you
crawled out. You limped away. You opened your eyes when they thought they'd never see you again. It's not weakness. That's warfare. Because the third escape isn't quiet. It's violent. It's brutal. It's the kind that leaves scars on your body and on your timeline. And maybe you still feel it sometimes. The ache when it rains. The panic in crowds. The way your heart races when a sound reminds you of that night. You're not broken. You're not crazy. You're not fragile. You're marked. Because when flesh and bone should have failed, Spirit stepped in. The truth. This moment shook heaven and hell. Heaven rejoiced. Hell panicked. Because again, death failed to collect what it thought it owned. And from that moment on, you were never the same. You see life differently now. You speak slower. You notice the sky more. You love deeper. Because you know what it means to almost lose it all. You walk with a limp in the spirit. Not out of weakness, but out of reverence, because you've seen the edge and you came back. So when people say you're too intense, too serious, too deep, just smile. They weren't there when you touched death and came back dripping in light. You are the one that survived. what no one expected you to walk away from. You are the one that the enemy counted out, and heaven resurrected anyway. Part 5, why you were spared. You've asked the question in the dark. Why me? Why did I make it through when others didn't? Why was I pulled from the wreckage, the pain, the brink? Why was I spared? Let me tell you something your soul already knows. You weren't just saved. You were chosen. And chosen ones don't just survive pain. They carry something out of it. Something weighty. Something holy. Something the world needs. Every time death came near, it wasn't just about stopping your heart. It was about stopping your assignment. Because if you ever remembered who you were, if you ever stepped fully into what you carry, if you ever realized the weight of your voice, your presence, your light, the kingdom of darkness would lose ground. That's why you were spared. Not because you were lucky, not because you were better, but because you were destined to heal what others couldn't name, to say what others were too afraid to say, to walk into rooms and shift atmospheres. Just by existing, you were spared because someone else is waiting on what's inside of you. That voice you almost silence, it's going to break chains. That compassion you almost drowned in, it's going to raise the dead. That wisdom you earned in private pain, it's going to lead nations. You didn't just survive, you were refined. Every escape carved something into your soul. The fire, the stillness, the knowing. You've felt the hands of angels. You've heard the whisper of God in hospital rooms, in empty bedrooms, in bathrooms where your knees hit the floor. And now, you carry authority, not the kind given by men, the kind forged in wilderness, in silence, in blood, the truth. You were spared because heaven's timeline still has your name on it. You were spared because someone else's breakthrough is tied to your obedience. Your yes will unlock their healing. Your survival will become their proof. Your testimony will become a map. For someone trying to climb out of the same pit you escaped, you were spared because your purpose is louder than your past. And when the enemy sees you now, he sees a walking threat. Because what should have killed you, commissioned you, you are not a victim. You are a vessel, a mirror, a signal, a prophecy in motion. And the fact that you're still breathing, still reading this, still standing, is proof enough God's not finished. You were never just surviving. Chosen one. Take a moment. Let everything you've just walked through settle into your spirit. Because this wasn't just a video. This was your confirmation. You didn't imagine it. You didn't over-dramatize it. You didn't barely escape by chance. You were spared on purpose. You've been in 3 battles most people never survive. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still seeing signs, still sensing the divine press against your soul. And that is everything. There's a reason your life has felt like warfare wrapped in silence. Because the ones God trusts the most, He hides the longest, and He trains them in shadows no one else sees. But now, He's revealing the why, not just for your comfort, but for your calling. You were delayed, but never denied. You were broken, but never discarded. You were spared, not for survival, but for impact. And now, you're entering the release. Everything the enemy tried to kill will now become a tool in your hands. Every trauma, a teaching, every escape, an authority, every delay, an anointing. So here's the sacred truth I need you to write on your mirror, on your heart, on your spirit. I was supposed to die, but I lived, and I lived because I'm not done. God still has work for me. You are the walking evidence. That purpose outranks pain. So what do you do now? You walk boldly, softly. You speak carefully, powerfully. You carry this truth like oil on your skin. You don't owe the world an explanation, but your life will become one. Because the world is watching, and they'll know something sacred happened to you. Now, if you feel this was for you, if your soul is trembling with remembrance, Then I invite you to make it known. Type 777 in the comments. Seal it in the spirit. Let heaven witness your agreement. Let hell know you're still here. And you remember why. You were chosen, you were preserved, and now you are being positioned. Stay humble. Stay aligned. Stay lit, because your story is just beginning, and the world won't know what hit it. But heaven already does. You're not late. You're not behind. You're right on time. And if you ever forget, just whisper this: I shouldn't be here, but I am, and that means I was chosen,